Welcome to Any Other Business. Thank you for joining us for this special episode. I believe this is the first time we've ever had a guest on Any Other Business. Hopefully the first of many. And what a guest we are kicking off with. We are joined today by Sarah Field. Sarah is on the board of trustees at Sandams International. Now, in yesterday's episode of the Property Podcast, you heard about the incredible work that they do and the incredible work that we are all going to do together to build a Sandam. So you can go and listen to that episode and you can donate if you haven't already at propertyhub.net/water. But before doing that, Sarah had an incredible business story. Sarah was the co-founder of a business called Little Kickers, which a lot of people, especially if you've got kids, will have heard of. And the story of how that business started and how it grew is amazing. So Rob recently caught up with Sarah to hear that story and hear how that turned into the Sandams project that we're all getting involved in now.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I've heard your story before, and the reason I've asked you on the podcast is because I want other people to hear it as well. I think it's an amazing story from a business that possibly wasn't intended. It wasn't like a vision that you had 5 years before, and then we're like going to go, oh, I must start this. We'll tell that story in a minute. But before we get to your business journey and then your incredible work with Sandams, how did it all begin? You don't have to take us back to birth, but your career, the foundations, your stepping stones for what was built afterwards.
Thanks very much for having me here. Obviously, Rob, it's nice to be talking. I think actually there is a bit of an important foundational step. All of this really, as you said, sort of accidental, fell into things, definitely zero vision. But one of the things that really has helped me at different points in time, which I didn't anticipate would, was my undergraduate degree. I did that at the London School of Economics, but I did it in geography. And, it wasn't very trendy at the time, but I did a few modules on sandy, dry river valleys, which at the time was actually in Spain. And I also did some work on kind of remote sensing, geographical information systems, which was a brand new field at the time, because you're talking 30 years ago now. But that stuff was quite handy, and I have referred back to it at different points in my career. And also just being at LSE meant I was in the city. In my final year of university, I just wandered down Fleet Street with a CV and I got a job in Goldman Sachs. And they were very kind to me. And I did sort of half of my final year, I suppose, I was working that job in parallel with my degree, which helped me enormously to get a graduate training program with one of the big management consulting firms. And I sort of fell out of LSE on the Friday, joined on the Monday, all of which was a really useful, fantastic grounding for what I ended up doing with the business. And even after that, in terms of scaling the charity. So yeah, sometimes things that you do early on, you don't really have any idea that they'll come back at you and be useful. And another thing, whilst I was working at the management consulting firm, we spent a couple of years in Johannesburg in South Africa, working at a bank there, which massively gave me the Africa bug. And, I fell in love with the whole continent and was pretty determined to kind of work my way back there at some stage in the future. So another thing that's sort of tucked away in my mind. So yeah, that was the foundational stuff really. Left pregnant with my second child. That's when sort of Little Kickers came along.
What I love about the Little Kickers story is it's the same with so many people who start businesses. It wasn't that you decided, right, we're going to start this business and it was all thought out. It was solving a pain point. You had a frustration and you wanted to solve that frustration, and it turned into a huge business. But the huge business obviously took time. But what was the frustration? How did Little Kickers start?
Yeah, a really simple beginning story, exactly like you say, just solving a pain point, a problem that we were hitting, which was that myself and my then business partner both had little boys, and we were waddling around pregnant with girls on sort of Clapham Common and places like that. And the boys would do anything. I mean, they were tiny and they would follow a ball absolutely anywhere. Both the dads were crazy football fans. And we just felt like we weren't really the right people to be teaching them. And my business partner said, well, look, why don't we find someone who can do this? And we found a football coach on Clapham Common. And I remember actually unfolding a packet of Marlboro Lights and with a pen, scribbling down on the back whilst chatting to this guy, what the program plan could look like, so we kind of have a bit of a warm up and, then they're going to want to shoot some goals. It'd be great if we could teach them how to kind of take turns and maybe we can bring colours and numbers into this. And, that's when the kind of how do we do it thing took off. But the actual why should we do it was this is a pain. And actually the Football Association were not teaching children under the age of 8 at that point in time. Obviously that's long since gone, but Little Kickers was certainly, we were pretty much the first people to do it. And we took a few pictures of my business partner's son kicking a ball around We put them in posters, we stuck them up on trees in Clapham Common. We booked a village hall and we ran the first class, and it was 4 times oversubscribed. They were like, well, could be onto something here. Actually, this could be, more than just teaching our kids. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Because that's what's interesting here. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to build this international brand. It was just, let's put a class on for our children and keep them busy and occupied by a professional rather than you and your business partner.
Yeah, exactly. And then everybody else just loved it. I suppose, football is a phenomenal hook. It's universally recognized and known. We'll say quite a few guys think their little boy might be the next, or girl might be the next England player, or a lot of people, aspirations for their children in that respect. And for a lot of the mums, it was just an opportunity to sit on the sidelines and relax and, maybe breastfeed the baby or chat to the friends and have a positive role model teaching their kids how to count, take turns, be sociable, as well as some physical skills. And, sort of 45 minutes off was very welcome. So it was popular for lots of different reasons, but it certainly just boomed, it exploded. And that's when some of those other skills, sort of made it much easier for me to just tackle the operational side and not be intimidated by it, to think, we need to get this off Excel. This is just agonizing trying to run this thing on Excel. So let's commission a business system. And I was like, okay, well, are we going to pay for it, or can we get some grant funding? We got money from the Federation of Small Business. They match funded us. We commissioned the business system, went out, found somebody to build it. I think both of us with a city background, we just weren't worried. We just like, okay, that problem needs solving, go and solve it. You need a health and safety approach, right? Let's find a consulting firm that can do that. We put it together quite quickly. All the kind of operational stuff that you need came together pretty fast. If there were problems, they were mainly problems of just how fast it was growing and trying to keep up with that.
So you've gone from 0 to 1 being the first event. Was it immediate in your minds that let's do another one? And then from running the second session, when did it become, okay, maybe we should run another location that our children don't even go to? Because that's kind of a big step, going from, okay, this is servicing our problem and our needs, but then you're going out to the world with hey, who else needs this?
Yeah, absolutely. And what was amazing about that is it was just demand. We didn't have to push it very hard at all. We very quickly got to a point where we had wait lists. I think we had only 2 age groups to begin with. And then we started to think, okay, we can divide it up a bit. We can teach younger, we can teach older. So we went from 18 months to 7 years, 4 different age groups. But we were still waitlisting on every class. And then I was like, well, there's another village hall just around the corner. Let's do a Wednesday class rather than a Tuesday class. We'll do Tuesday and Wednesday. I think both of us knew we were onto something that would scale quickly pretty fast. And we were both looking for something to do. We were both of us by that stage were actually not even on maternity leave. We'd left our previous jobs. So we had all the incentive. We thought, okay, let's build this up. Let's grow this. And it literally just galloped. There was a real pain point when we got to about 30 classes, I think, across South London. And we were operating 3 different legal entities. We were really struggling. We'd get, be on our own school runs and you'd get a phone call to say, oh, the coach hasn't managed to get into the venue. He's lost the key, or, the system's crashed. It was just continuous and a lot of pressure, actually, for just the 2 of us. And then we had a lady who was in one of our South London classes who said, you've got to come to North London. We're moving up to North London. My child is going to be bereft without little kickers. You've got to set a class up. And we're like, well, no, we can't. That's too far. That's too far. We can't possibly stretch our lives that far.
Can't go over the Thames.
Yeah, exactly. And she said, no, I think we were well over the Thames by then, but we were sort of central South London. So she just said, well, look, why don't you sell me a franchise? And we're like, ding, light bulb. Didn't know quite what franchise was at that stage. So sort of confidently said, oh, so we'll consider that. And then went away and learned what a franchise was and thought, absolutely, this has got to be the way to go with a business like this. Because if you just ran it all yourself from a central business, it would just completely overwhelm us so quickly. We'd have to have a huge central organization. But if you franchise, obviously like McDonald's or any other the huge franchises that are out there, that the quality is going to stay really, really high. That the brand's going to be supported. The people you bring in are going to be people you like and people you screen and train yourself. And so it's going to be done as well as you love doing it, but other people are going to be doing it. And then obviously, you're going to be getting a franchise fee. And that's when the numbers really kick in, especially obviously franchising overseas as well. So going beyond the UK market, which we did really quickly as well. We were out, I think, by the time I got my exit, we were in South Africa, we were in Ireland and the UK, and people were just phoning all the time and saying, we've seen this, we've heard about it. We were batting quite a few competitors off as well. That was always, our strategy was just do it better. So if somebody else comes in and, they're in that village hall, you set up next door and just do it better, right? Outcompete them. And we had just such a great formula and such amazing coaches and parents, and, everyone was very loyal. The brand, my husband actually came up with the name for the brand, Little Kickers. And that's obviously endured.
It's amazing. So how long did it take from you to go from that very first session in Clapham to 30 sessions? So you had 30 different events going on. Was that every week or every month?
No, 30 classes a week.
A week, wow. And how long did that take from 0 to 30?
I mean, we are going back some time now. I always get a bit of imposter syndrome because I've looked such a long time ago now. But we probably did that in about a year and a half, I think. And
that's when the first franchise came in.
Yeah, and that's when the lovely Julie Levine in North London said, sell me a franchise. And then really I think it went up to at least 4 master franchises in other areas, or franchise of master, or, international franchises, let's say, by the time I got my exit. So in 7 or 8 years, I don't have any remaining interest in Little Kickers. I sold my whole half, if you like, but I occasionally go back and, have a look at the website and stuff. And I think someone mentioned a number of 70,000 children coming a week globally now.
Wow.
Once you're onto scale with a franchising model, if it works, it's sky's the limit, really. And with football, of course, it's just never-endingly popular. It doesn't go through phases.
No, it's been around a while.
It's been around a while, yeah. So that's what drove us. And the scale was quick. It was fast.
So from that first franchise, how many franchises did you roughly have by the time you exited 7 or 8 years later?
I think it was in the 70s to 80s mark. I had done about 70 odd training programs, I think, at that point,
Wow.
where you pull the franchises. We had an office, we had a good staff team. I'd certainly been kind of taking groups of franchisees through the 5-day training program a lot at that point. And I remember the day I left, I put everything online. So that was always my kind of side of it, the web and the business systems and the making sure that everything was libraried online, that people could access it online. And I mean, no one else was doing that when we were setting up. You went round to your little local village hall, you paid a £5 a class on the day in cash, whereas we were enrolling online, re-enrolling online. You're able to pause your classes online. You're able to buy your strip online because, of course, every age group has different strip. So, yeah, I think the technology behind it was really important.
That's incredible. So the 30 classes that you had, did you eventually franchise those out as well, or did you carry on running those for
Yeah, no, we did. We divvied things up. Some of the classes that we'd been running, we put into franchise areas and those were sold. Yeah, for sure. Because then that just reduced the amount that we were doing centrally. I'm not sure if that's currently still the case, but it was to try and make sure that we had the resource to really build that franchising model out from the core and not be distracted by constantly running classes ourselves. So there definitely was a kind of contraction initially. As I say, I don't know how things are now, but that was important. And it's also, revenue. I mean, the great thing about this business all the way through until I know relatively recently they had VC in, it was all self-funding. It was just such a cash cow. Although you had a cash position to run because we were selling classes in advance and you have to deliver them over the next 3 months, if you like. So selling kind of terms in advance. Cash position was always great, and it was completely self-funding apart from that very first grant that we got for building the business system from the Federation of Small Business. So, the government funding kind of underpinned that bit, but the rest of it was all self-funded. And selling those initial franchise areas was definitely part of that.
So the 8-year journey, it sounds like if we just left it there, that it was like you started, it ballooned, it grew, and then you exited. And if we didn't know better, we'd say, okay, well, that sounds easy, but I know it wasn't. And there's going to be loads of challenges when you're scaling, even if your business is in demand. What are the biggest challenges that when you look back at it now that really stand out to you that were particularly difficult to navigate as you grew that business?
Just the blood, sweat and tears of having a young family and being at the coalface, running initially everything on those awful spreadsheets. I mean, luckily we worked with a brilliant, I found this lovely software company down on the Isle of Wight. They just held our hands brilliantly all the way through and were absolutely fantastic to work with, called Net Guides. But the pain of, it's like when you're developing a business system and something falls over, or you realize you need a different requirement, or you need that change done, and you've got to keep track of absolutely everything. And meanwhile, you're tracking all the parents who are enrolling day by day. And then one of them pulls out, one of them doesn't send the check, one of them hasn't paid. It's just that relentless kind of, I remember, I would put the kids to bed, carry on working. I know my business partner was doing the same, practically work all night, get up, carry on, take the kids to nursery, It was really, really heavy going whilst we were just growing so quickly. We tried to resource it properly. We got a quality manager in fairly quickly, which was really helpful. They ran around and scooped up those keys that, were suddenly lost on a Sunday morning or whatever it was. We did it intelligently, I think, but you just can't get away from all the different plates you spin. We had it so refined and we updated the game plans all the time. So it was new and fun and interesting and different. And we knew our parents, had a lot of faith and trust in the website and in the business system. And, they were fine handing money over to us. We weren't trying to shuffle cash around at classes and things. And it was just really high quality. And I think people gravitated to Little Kickers classes. And that, it doesn't always make you friends when there's other people trying to do similar things in the space, which it obviously got a lot more busy as we went along.
Because you were doing so well.
Yeah.
People want to copy successful businesses, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And we were always indoors in little village halls and sports centres, and that was the recipe. So we could do it 365 days a year, pretty much. You weren't weather dependent. We weren't, and a lot of people were running classes outside with more difficulty. So yeah, we ran very safe. A huge amount of time and attention went in, as another massive headache at the time, into all the health and safety checks and making sure every venue was checked before every class. It was intense in terms of getting all those plates spinning and then keeping them spinning whilst we were scaling so quickly. That's only to the 80 or so that we had when I exited. I dread to think almost how incredibly hard work and busy it's been since then, because now there's thousands and thousands and thousands of franchises and they are all over the world. But it's the same model. That's the thing about franchising. It's grown. I go back in, I look on the classes being run and it's the same strips, it's the same age groups, it's the same session plans pretty much. It's, you can see if you get it right from the beginning and it's high quality and you spend a lot of time and attention wiggling through all the details, and getting it brilliant, then if it's a franchise model, then it's going to scale that way. And of course there were things that you had to adjust to and adapt to, but generally speaking, the pain and the sweat and the tears were worth it. But it was really, really hard. And I think it's hard on us personally, lots of time lost with my small children, set it up so the son, in theory, could play football. He was never that interested in football. And at the time, we didn't have that many girls coming. Now, of course, fantastic that there's a huge amount of girls coming by the looks of it. So that's great. But yeah.
My own daughter went through, it must have been 7-8 years ago. And she still plays today.
Yeah. Amazing.
So, and Little Kickers was a big part of that. And plus having a big brother who loved football and she wanted to copy everything he did. But Little Kickers also. Tell me about the competition. It's easy enough for somebody to go and set up another class somewhere. But did you have anybody come into the space, look at what you were doing, and then come in with, decent funding and ambitions to try and really rival you or take over, or even just blatantly copy everything you do? I mean, I don't know what scale it got to, the competition. Was it just localized, or was there anyone coming into the market, aggressively trying to compete with you?
I'd say that franchisees would probably say that it's localized, because to them, you have your franchise area, you know your venues, you know how many kids you've got. And so if somebody comes and suddenly sets 3 classes up on your doorstep, that's going to feel like competition no matter who they are. Mm-hmm. But in terms of a national scale, yeah, there was certainly someone up in Leeds, had much more of a let's produce the next David Beckham, let's produce the next England team, was much more kind of football focused. But because there were such young children, that was never really our focus. It was quality football, but it was all about the sharing and the taking turns and the numbers and those other kind of social skills and exercise and fun, happiness and all those lovely things that football brings. We weren't really focused on whether or not you could dribble backwards or whatever this was at 5 or 5 years old. There was certainly someone who came in with much sort of higher football ambitions, if you like, who did spend quite a lot of time, I think, probably looking at our classes and set up in quite a similar way. Again, it didn't materialize and we just carried on. We just carried on doing it really, really well. I think it's a good lesson because whenever you get competition, your kind of initial thought is, oh no. But actually they market make for you, right? If they're out there selling football classes, they're getting to more parents. More parents are aware that there are football classes out there and you're on that menu. You're one of the choices. So I think competition is often really healthy and it also just teaches you where there's capacity. So if somebody set a class up there, well, why is that? Because there's tons of small children over there who want to play football. So that's a good place to set up a class.
Well, looking back, I can see exactly how unemotionally you could look at it like that. But were you so logic-based when it happened? Or were there emotions involved? Like, oh my God, we've got competition. Or were you just always calm and just went with it and you were confident in your position? Can you remember how you felt?
I think I probably felt more threatened because I was the sort of operations one. But my business partner was super confident and just carried on. We just keep going. We knew we had huge feedback, tons of testimonials. Right from the very beginning, we included all the testimonials on the website and you could look at how happy all the parents were. There was tons of really positive feedback, lots of media coverage. I probably had an initial hiccup, but it certainly didn't stop us day to day. It couldn't stop us. We were too busy to be stopped. It's like, you didn't really slow down for that. You just got to keep going. So it's a different industry, right? Many people corporately, it might be a much bigger deal if somebody's selling the same widget sets up next door, but for us, just the levels of demand and the amount of preschool children that are out there, you knew that if somebody set up, what you had to do was just do it better. And then they would come to your classes and they would stay in your classes. And we had literally had wait lists of over 100 on these classes. And there would be outrage if one parent got bumped. You couldn't do it. They all knew exactly what position they were on the wait list because you could see it. Lots of loyalty overcame, I think, those feelings of kind of like, this is a bit threatening. We just kept going.
So you've talked about like working into the night, and sometimes entrepreneurship seen as like that's part of the glamour, like, oh, I worked through the night and I was tired. But actually when you live in it, it's exhausting. And you say like the blood, the sweat and the tears, but it really can drive you to that. Do you remember a point where you were close to tears, or maybe you experienced the tears where it's just loads? Could you share one or two stories around that? Because I think it's important. People hear the success. I think that's what's shared a lot in business. Like, we grew and we did this amazing thing. I mean, to call them bumps is a real understatement. There are so many bumps in the road. Sometimes it's the road's disappeared and you don't even know which way to go. It can be really tough.
Yeah, I think in our case, the road stayed. Right, the road was very clear how fast this was growing, what direction it was going in. We were pretty strategic. We understood that this could go all over the world because football is global. So the kind of pull was very known. But what happened personally was my mother got very sick. She got ovarian cancer and ultimately in 3 years died from that. And at the same time, her husband, my stepdad, died of liver cancer. And I had 2 tiny children, at the time, and the business to run, my side of the business to run. It was really, really challenging. And there were, relationship issues. Founders aren't always the right people to carry on and run a business. And I think certainly from an operations point of view, I knew when I had done my thing, when it was sort of time to move on, because not only was the business absolutely going to, storm onwards, but I needed to take some time off and kind of reset and spend some time with my kids and grieve what happened to me sort of personally. That was definitely a big side of it. The business is not to blame at all. It was just a confluence of things that happened all at once. And my mum was my best friend and, my biggest supporter. So it was really hard to go through all of that in parallel with this business that was just so super demanding.
That's the thing with the business, right? You can't just go, can you just wait for 6 months while I process all this? Sometimes you can't go 6 hours without needing you. That must have been really intense.
It was really intense. And I did step back and then got my exit. So in a way, it was perfectly timed. And I certainly look back and I've got no regrets at all. having stepped away like that, because I really did need to do that. And we'd moved and all sorts of things. I just needed, some time to kind of settle down a bit, really. It was also wonderful. The day I left was the day, I'm not sure I said this already, but it was the day that I put everything online. So I knew that everything was kind of safely out of my head and out of my desk and out of all the drawers and the chaos where you're running stuff in an office at home. And it had all been uploaded online, was all accessible by all the franchisees and the business. And I could step away. That was a great moment, actually. It was like, that's the job done, and it's up there. And we brought in areas that were really kind of risk sensitive and stuff like the health and safety. I got a consulting firm to come in and take that over. So I really knew even the kind of really risky bits were going to be covered. The business system was brilliant by that stage. And I think carried on and ran the business for at least another 10 or 15 years after that before they switched platforms. And the franchise family was happy. They were all doing brilliantly. They were all running great businesses. That's kind of a really cool thing with having a load of franchisees, is that they become your friends. They become people whose lives, you're kind of looking out for, and you get all the lovely stories of how having this second income or having this primary income has made such a difference to their lives. And so I knew it was kind of leaving a well-shaped business that was well set up, that was going to carry on and scale and be very successful. I never had a moment's doubt. And also my business partner is phenomenal. So I knew that she'd do a brilliant job. But it was hard. Yeah, it was hard. It's always hard to let go, I think.
I can imagine. To put a bow on it, to take it as far as you felt was to the right point at the right time, doing all the things you wanted to do, and then having a successful exit. So many people don't get to go on that journey. So many people, so many people don't even get a business off the ground. That's hard enough. But then to get one that's scaled and then had an exit, and then you've left at what you felt is the right time for you. That's like winning the business Olympics. There isn't an Olympics for business, but that is it. And you don't just get the medal at the end. You have to do lots of the blood, the sweat, the tears, and all the emotions of having a life outside of a business as well. And that's super hard. But you got to complete that, and not many people do. So well done to you. It's an incredible story.
I certainly wouldn't put myself up on the podium. It wasn't a gold medal, let's put it this way. If it had been gold, it probably would have been worth more than that. But I had a number that I was working to at the time, and I got that number, and I got away from all the stress and the pressure. And yeah, the best thing about it, and it was really hard, don't get me wrong, that was a really, really difficult time for lots of reasons. And some of them, obviously, I'm not going into now, but it was a tricky time. But what was wonderful was seeing it then carry on. I go out I randomly was in, Iowa, or I don't know where it was, somewhere out in the sticks in the States. We just spent a few years living out there. And I was having my nails done in a salon, and a little stream of little kickers people.
Oh, wow.
And they're all in their little strips that we designed at the time. They haven't changed. All the branding's the same and stuff. And it was just, that's really nice. That's really rewarding. I like that.
That's your legacy.
And I'm written out of most of the kind of corporate history, because that's what happens. You're an early founder. You'd expect that to happen. And it's enough just to see those little streams of children running past. You just think, yeah, that's quite cool. Okay, we did that.
So if you could go back and mentor yourself, what advice or guidance would you give yourself during that journey?
Maybe the big thing, I think the thing that would have probably made all the difference right at the beginning, we were offered, I think by the Federation of Small Business, somebody was going to come in who was a wise old owl, and they were going to take 1% or something, and they were going to just help us think through some of that stuff and some of the relationship stuff, and how to be co-founders of a business that was so frantic. And I can't remember why we didn't do that. I think he was the chap that also got us the loan, the matching funding for the business system. I don't look back and regret much, but that would have been, I'm sure, really handy to have someone like that. That might have been really helpful. I'm sure that someone who'd had a great deal of experience, and I think it was a franchising business as well, that possibly would have been a really good thing to say yes to. Again, I think with all these things, there's no point in looking back and saying we should have done this or we should have done that, or I would have told myself this or that. We were running so fast just to keep up. But I don't think we just wouldn't have the time to do that.
And unfortunately, at least it has been for me, it's that I think you get the lessons through the pain when you mess up yourself, and you're like, oh no. but the pain is there, so you don't want to do it again, and then you want to fix it. If someone is guiding you through, maybe they can bring you less pain, but you still need to feel some of it, because if you just keep winning, you don't know what the real world is like in business. And it's that pain, it's that obstacles, it's the stuff that you've got to figure out and solve. That's where the real growth happens, and that's where you either kick on as a business owner or you fail, because you go, oh, okay, I'm going to take this as a learning opportunity and I'm going to put a new process in place, or not hire that way again, or wherever it may be. But you have to feel the pain to really appreciate the lesson.
And to actually find the flaws. Something's got to fall over and break and not happen the way you want it to, or because otherwise, especially with a franchise model that you want to be able to be repeated in a high quality way time and time and time again, you have to find the flaws. That it's good, it's positive learning actually, when even something as silly as a child fell over and bumped their head on a radiator, then you go, oh my God, are there radiators in all of our venues? How do we cover those? How do we make sure, okay, that we got to check those on a health and safety thing, and then it won't happen again, because it could have been so much more serious, through to signing a contract with someone that just gave them too big a franchise area, or the wrong deal, or the wrong percentage, all sorts of things. I suppose that's where serendipity comes into it. Some things you can plan for, and some things break and you learn, and then some things are just lucky. It was lucky that it was football, wasn't it? I don't know, we could have chosen archery or something.
Every business needs luck, without question, but you need to then take full advantage of that luck. Luck presents itself in lots of places in life. Not everybody rides that luck and takes it the journey that it can go on, but you definitely did that. So you've not put your feet up since Little Kickers. You've been very busy, and a lot of that time you've dedicated has been to sand dams. I've talked to our wonderful audience community about sand dams in yesterday's podcast, but I'd love you to explain, what is it about sand dams that caught your imagination? Why have you dedicated so much of your life to helping build more sand dams across the world? And I know you want to do so much more as well, but what was it about that charity? Because there's loads of charities. So what was it about sand dams that caught your imagination?
Well, to be honest, I did take a few years off after exiting Little Kickers, and I helped a few other businesses. I, did a bit of consulting work, but nothing had really engaged me. I even went and took some RHS gardening courses, and we were renovating a house and all those sorts of things. But it got to the point where I'd done some UK-based charity work, but I wanted to do something overseas. And I, obviously, my sort of Africa bug was still very much there, and we were holidaying out there, and I'd gone down and I'd done some environmental consulting down in Cape Town on a sabbatical. So I'd sort of started to shift myself that way, but didn't really know how to do it. And as you say, there was so much choice out there. I just couldn't find something to get stuck into. And my son, by that stage, was coming into a gap year. And I was thinking he's going to have to go and do some things. So I was just online. And I mean, goodness knows how I got sand dams out, because something that a lot of people know about. And I'm not sure it was the first search return on Google, that's for sure. But anyway, I found sand dams. It was actually called Excellent Development. I found a small charity in London called Excellent Development. We've recently rebranded to Sand Dams Worldwide, but they were called Excellent Development at the time. They were running sort of learning experiential trips out to Kenya in order to learn about water poverty, to learn about the kind of water capture technology that could be used out there. And I thought, well, yeah, that'd be a great thing for him to do. And then I looked a bit closer and I was like, well, this is about sand, and it's about water in sand and sandy, dry river valleys. And that sort of chimed back to what I did on my undergraduate course. And it's Africa, obviously, and loved Kenya. It wasn't anything more complicated than that. It was literally, I just Googled it. I found this trip for my son, and I decided, actually, I want to go. That's quite, so my poor son, he thought he was going off on his own gap year, and actually his mother ended up coming with him, which I'm sure was not his plan. But it was amazing. It was just a week. It was in Makueni County in Kenya, and Excellent Development were an obviously deeply experienced, amazing, small UK charity who'd been doing this work for a long time. They've been doing it for about 23 years now in total. So, and this was about 8 years ago, and I went on that expedition. And I thought, gosh, this is just so logical and obvious. Phrase that came to mind was, these should be everywhere. Everywhere where there is an arid or semi-arid land, where there are people or wildlife living in areas where they don't have enough access to water, but where it rains occasionally and there's sand. And actually, that is that whole dry belt across the middle of the world. There are as many as 2 billion people living in those circumstances. So that's a lot of potential franchisees, was sort of how my head on a social franchising charity way, obviously. But basically, there's a brilliant solution here. It's called a sand dam. It totally works. I've gone out, I've built one. I've got hands on in, I've listened to all the beneficiaries, I've spoken to the charity. These just need to be everywhere. And that to me chimed with the Little Kickers model. It's like, this works really well. They've documented it. They've got an operating manual. They've got field manuals. They've got fantastic relationships on the ground with locally owned, local implementation partners. This is a locally led solution. The communities build them. They own them. They operate them. There's zero dependence once they're up and running. It doesn't break like many of the other water capture solutions can. I mean, they're still appropriate for things like boreholes. Those sorts of things can break very easily. To me, it's just the light sort of went on. I thought, this is it. This is this kind of thing where it needs to be scaled around the world. They're looking to scale. That was very much already in their strategy to take that next jump up, to not only pioneer new countries, so get these things into new places around the world that desperately need them, but to, and not only to enable directly, fund directly, because that's really what the UK charity does. It's a sort of funding engine from the UK side, but also to influence the building of more sand dams. So to influence other NGOs who are working in the water capture space, teach them what a sand dam is and have them add that, if you like, into their toolkits. And then look at the broader picture with institutions and larger multinational organizations and see if we can really start to accelerate the building of these things, because the benefits were just so blindingly obvious and huge. It's a very large scale solution. So that's the initial hook. So the initial hook was, I literally just went out, did a week's expedition. I would encourage anyone to do that. It was a huge eye opener. Very humbling. They were incredible people who lack only one thing, and that's water. And if you can add a clean local source of water into a community, they can do all the rest of it. They're tremendously enterprising people who value education extremely highly, who are very talented farmers who, it's just that the climates are changing, rainfall's reducing or getting much more intense, but in a shorter period of time. And so sand dams that catch that rainfall where it falls are the solution that I think can be scaled all over the world. And I think the headline number as well, that was my entry point. And I think the number I heard that had the most impact on me in terms of this is the scale of this problem is that the UNICEF came out with a figure quite recently. It's all very evidence-based. There's about 200 million hours a day lost to women, mostly women and children, although obviously men are involved too, but mostly women and children walking for water and sanitation needs. If you gave back that 200 million hours of productivity every day, even to things like just family care, personal hygiene, menstrual health, being able to grow kitchen gardens, nutrition, food, farming, tree growing, it just goes on and on and on. All that time can go back into those types of activities if you can give a local supply of water and overcome that whopping, unimaginable problem. So yeah, those were sort of some of the drivers that really got me hooked.
You've touched on it a bit there, but you've had the privileged position of seeing a before and after. So you went on that first expedition, you helped build one, but you've also seen lots of places that have benefited from the finished article as well.
Yeah.
What has that done for those people in that area? And, to say people is really underselling it. It's like the communities, it's not even one community, the communities that benefit from it. What have you seen afterwards? Like, what impact has that made?
Well, I mean, the most fantastic story for that one is Chimwisu. So the dam I went out on as just an expeditioner. So, I've subsequently led a lot of those expeditions and I've done a ton of community interviews and been on the ground a lot out there. But the first one was Chimwisu. So we built one of the biggest sand dams. So we joined a community who had been building the dam for 2 or 3 months at that point. And we were lucky to join it at a stage where we were mixing all the cement, and it was very physical and very hands-on and very demanding. And that was a really large sand dam. So it's a masonry wall across a riverbed. It gets tied into the riverbeds either side, and it's not hopefully going to move for between 50 to 100 years. And behind it collects sand. The sand collects into a large tail, 2 kilometers long, and then the water is held in that sand every time it rains. because sand holds water in suspension. Just like when you go to a beach and you dig a hole, you see the sand flood into that water and it's clean. So the sand filters the water clean, it holds it there all the way through the dry seasons, and then you can extract it in a myriad of ways, so that the communities extract it using solar panels, scoop holes, pumps, all sorts of things. Now, Chimwisu was designed for about 3,500 community members. So that was the community members in the immediate catchment that were going to have access to clean local water for their sanitation needs, their hygiene, and for farming and lots of other uses. I think I've gone back to that one 5 times. So on 5 separate occasions, 5 separate years, I've revisited that Sandam site. They've now got a major solar installation pumping water up 6 or so kilometers to communities that are further afield. And the last head count was 10,080 people's needs being served by that very large sand dam. So the kind of return on investment tripled over the time that between when we built it 7 or 8 years ago to today. I'll sit and talk to community members and they'll say, before this was around, I wasn't clean. I'd never been clean. My children had not been clean. We didn't have enough water to drink, let alone wash. We were very frequently sick because the water carried malaria, bilharzia, all these waterborne diseases. Of course, water trapped in sand, those diseases can't get access. So the water's way cleaner and they weren't getting any of those horrible health problems. They weren't getting attacked on the way to collect water, which is a major issue. You've always got to take the same route and it's going to take you hours. You're obviously very vulnerable to people knowing that that's happening. And then also arguments and fights, the reduction in those was absolutely enormous, because when you're hot and you're tired and you're headachy and you've been walking for hours and you get to a water supply and there's a dribble coming out and there's a massive queue, and you've got to stand there in the blistering heat waiting to fill a 20-litre jerry can that you're then going to walk back with, on your head several hours. It just causes so much conflict and pain for people, injuries, all that sort of the kind of basic fundamental stuff. And then having to eat rain-fed agriculture crops. So the very basic carbohydrate type crops. You're not eating vegetables. You're not eating protein. You're basically malnourished your whole life. The misery that brings, really. All of that is lifted. These community beneficiaries, they would talk to me and say, I'm clean, I'm well fed, I'm growing a little kitchen garden now, we're eating tomatoes, mangoes, melons, the kind of fruit and vegetables they never had access to. And now we're growing surplus, and now we're selling the surplus in the local market. And now ladies from the local market are coming to our farms, buying the kale for a lower price, taking it to market, selling it for a surplus. And that's the Kenyan shillings they need for their kids to go to school. So we've got kids getting back to education. Children normally have to take a bottle of water to school in the morning. Well, if you're the child that had to get up at dawn, go to somewhere to collect that out of a scoop hole or a puddle or whatever it is, dirty stream, walk that all the way back to your house and then go to school. By the time you get to school, you're not going to learn very much at all. So education attainment, way better. There's like this big ripple of effects that happens all the way around. And then once a community's got one sand dam, actually they can have, and you're talking about lots of communities, thousands of people, they might have more than one sand dam. And then they can start doing things like market gardening and true terracing, agriculture. Where I've seen a sand dam site before, it's just arid and dry and overgrazed and nasty, they turn into oases. The regreening effect is huge because the sand dam raises the water table as well as trapping water. It percolates water slowly down into the water table and then on into the aquifers. So it's an ecosystem uplift as well. And people even reporting it just feels cooler. The climate's nicer. We've got a little bit more rain. These things, when they're done at scale, the cumulative benefits to communities are huge, and the cumulative benefits to the environment. I've been on sand dam sites. You've got migrating birds coming in. You've got bees and butterflies and bumblebees. And actually lots of our beneficiaries will farm bees. They'll farm for honey. So there's hives, and the whole thing just is totally transformed. And it's amazing. And it's on such a large scale. It's not one little borehole in the middle of a field. This is landscape scale change. You can see them from space. The benefits are huge. I could probably keep going all day in terms of and agroforestry, organic farming techniques, enclosure. All that can happen with a community, and they get a tremendous amount of training and support before and after having a sand dam, so that they can really manage and run it themselves as a self-help group, so government-registered self-help group. They can do enormous amounts as soon as they've got that water supply. It all starts with water, and that's what a sand dam provides, and it provides it at scale, and it keeps it there Many of our sand dams are still providing water through some really long and severe droughts. In Kenya in 22-23, there was 5 consecutive rains failed. And when you say a failed rain, when you're only getting rain in 2 short rainy seasons twice a year, when they fail, it is catastrophic. But when they fail and you have a sand dam locally that you can still extract water from all the way through, it's far less catastrophic, and your basic needs almost certainly going to be met. So they have to be well sited. They have to be superlative quality. The engineering has to be brilliant. You can build bad sand dams, but Sand Dams Worldwide certainly doesn't, and has phenomenal implementation partners in East Africa that do a brilliant job of making sure that these are things that are going to stick around for generations. And we're just beginning, when we go back now to testimonials to sites that have been around, 10, 12 years. There are people who've now finished tertiary education. They've gone on to become doctors and nurses and health workers, and they were kids raised on sand dams, a bit like little kickers. But yeah, if you set them up well, that's the thing, and set well up in life, then they got all the skills to take that forward. It's just when you don't have water and your whole life revolves around the search for water and then cleaning water, and trying to get enough water day by day by day, day in, day out, it stops you doing all these things. So yeah, the beneficiaries are myriad. The benefits just keep accruing. The longer the sand dam's there, providing the self-help group remains engaged and committed, they can end up running huge market gardens and exporting fine green beans to Waitrose. So
this goes beyond life-changing. Like, this is community changing, and not just a community of a few people. Like you've said, thousands upon thousands of people. That's just one sand dam. And it's not life-changing for a day. It's then life-changing for generations. And this story that you told me, that as soon as we sat down together for the first time and you told me about sand dams, I was sold. I then went on the reverse mission of trying to sell myself to you and the rest of the sand dams board to go, I really want to help you guys, because this is just unbelievable. This is like stuff that makes such an incredible difference. And I've got the bug now. I've got that passion bug, and I hope people listening have as well. Like, it's just inspiring the difference that this technology, it may sound like, new or something's been discovered, but you told me it's thousands of years old. This is something that's proven to work for a long time. It's just not known, and that's what we're trying to change now. We want people to know that this is there, and this can make an incredible difference. And everybody listening to this right now can as well, because we are match funding.
That's why it's so fantastic that you've come on board, because you're a communicator. We've got an incredibly dedicated, fantastic staff team in London who, have been hammering away at the coalface, raising funds, getting these things enabled out in East Africa, doing the work on the ground. It's hard, it's hard graft, and to have the time and space to step back and go, right, let's really learn about communicating it better and get some help on that communication side. It's difficult when you're running at 100 miles an hour. Again, it's always the way, right? It's a very, very busy team with a huge amount of challenges, and they do brilliantly. We've got a great website, encourage people to go and check that out, but it will be really transformative to have someone like you on the board. And I'm so happy and glad that you chose to join us as a trustee. And obviously you're now taking that up a gear and funding a sand dam next year, which is magical. And you're going to get to see that whole process, from the beginning all the way through. I can't wait for you to do an expedition and see that all happening. And also, whilst you're out there, you'll get to talk to some of our beneficiaries and have a look at sand dams, both that are being built, that have been around for a long time. So hopefully you'll have all the stories as well. You'll be there armed with all these amazing stories.
I can't wait. And what also is brilliant is that members of this amazing Property Hub community will be there as well. Not everyone, unfortunately. There's not a plane big enough for that, at least a few. And if you are listening to this and you want to help make a difference, whether it's £10, 100, 1,000, whatever it might be, because we've got all different types of listeners to this podcast and all different abilities to fund, but whatever is given, we are going to match fund it. So we will get this built, because I know how incredible this community is. So please go to propertyhub.net/water. You'll then be redirected to the right place to donate. But go to propertyhub.net/water. You'll find out more. You'll be able to make a donation. But also share this, because you've heard how incredible this is now. Please share these episodes from yesterday, today, to help other people understand what this technology is and how incredible it is, because that's what's key right here. Is once people understand it, I'm convinced Every single person listening will want to donate in one way or another and make a difference. Now they understand it, and now they've heard about how truly life-changing, community-changing it is. But share that message as well. So please, we've given for over 10 years on this podcast, way over 10 years, and we don't sell anything on the podcast. And I'm not selling you anything here as well. What I'm asking is whether it's you want to do it for Sandams or you want to do it as a thank you to the podcast, wherever it may be, I'm finally making an ask of you after all these years. And this is the ask. Please go to propertyhub.net/water, find out more, share this, and please donate wherever you can. Because together, and it is together, can build another Sandam and change another community and change many hundreds, if not thousands of lives. And that's real. And that's all you wanted to do is go to that domain. So please go there.
Rob, thank you so much. That's fantastic. I'm very moved by you getting so behind this. It's just brilliant. I know the team in London will be absolutely thrilled as well. And I would say, I don't know whether you can put a link on your website, but we have this little animation, just 2 minutes of someone's time to have a quick look at it. And where I haven't been able to tell the whole kind of, engineering story, if you like, of a Sandam today, that will show you in an animation exactly how they're built and what they look like on the ground. And yeah, just kind of, it's quite a good summary of what we've spoken about today. I think if you get a chance to have a look at that little animation, it's worth doing.
We'll include that in the show notes. So please go to propertyhub.net/water. All your funds go to this charity, and we will match fund. And hopefully in the very, very near future, we're celebrating that together with this incredible community. We're funding another Sandam. And that won't be the end of it. We'll go on the journey together and find out how it's getting on and how it's being built and where it's being built. And all that stuff will be shared. And it's a journey that we can go on together. This is the ultimate build. It's better than a house or a block of apartments. This is so much more meaningful. So please go to propertyhub.net/water. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm so looking forward to like you say, the ultimate build, Property Hub's ultimate build. Can't wait to be a part of that.
Yeah, me too.
So there you go. What an amazing story. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us on the show. And remember, if you haven't yet made your contribution to the Sandam that we are funding, you can do that at propertyhub.net/water, and we are going to match every pound that's put in. Thank you for joining us for Any Other Business. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.